After 3 weeks that seemingly passed by in a flash, it's time yet again. Overwatch League Midseason Tournament number 2 is upon us. It's time for the Summer Showdown predictions. Because there's North American region games taking place on Friday, you guys get weekly Preds a day early. That's pretty awesome, right? The format of my Preds for this tournament will be the same as the May Melee. Because there's only 6 games in the APAC region, I'll be going more in-depth with those games. The North American region, on the other hand, will be a bit briefer. I'll explain my process for certain situations, but I won't always be going into a ton of detail for every single game. The video would be way too long if I did that. Not to mention that I can't say for certain who everybody's going to select to play in the quarterfinals. Even just one wrong prediction for who picks who could completely derail the entire bracket. And I don't want to waste my time breaking down multiple matchups that don't even happen. While that certainly could be a problem in the APAC region as well, if I mess up with those games, it's not a huge deal since there aren't nearly as many games or potential outcomes. I don't have the luxury in the North American region. Apologies in advance if that disappoints any of you, but I want to use a system that I'm comfortable with, and I hope you're okay with that. Like with the May Melee predictions, how about I start off with my North American bracket? So for the most part, I would say there isn't anything too crazy going on here. In the knockout round, I definitely see all of the higher seeds winning their matchups. I will say though, besides Paris versus Dallas, I'm kind of expecting the other games to be pretty decent potentially. With Valiant versus Toronto, I could honestly see the Defiant putting up a decent fight. I know Toronto stink, but Genji comps gave the Valiant trouble last week, and if Toronto look at how Paris executed, then they might be able to find some success. Now ultimately, I don't think it matters, as I do believe the Valiant will make the needed adaptations to win. I could even see a world where the Valiant potentially use some different comps and playstyles. Perhaps we'll even see them break out KSF for some Genji or something. Part of me is a little worried that they're going to stick to the same stuff, but they are without a doubt a better team still than Toronto, so they should be able to advance. As for the other two games, my mindset for both of them is pretty similar. My big takeaway is there is a decent amount of upset potential considering that both of the higher seeded teams had struggles with the opponents they selected for the knockout round. Florida had trouble running their Genji comps at times versus Houston, and the Gladiators had trouble dealing with Genji on the side of Washington. While I do have confidence that both teams will come out on top, I have a lot of confidence in particular with Florida just because I think they'll make better adaptations this time around, but the Gladiators I'm a bit more unsure about. They have not played all that great lately, and there's a serious chance they end up losing if they aren't careful. The Justice have to be feeling good about themselves now that their hard work is finally starting to pay off. But I'm going to remain faithful in the Gladiators coaching staff to be more prepared this time. Them and their players will be able to weather the storm, and in the end they will get the job done. Now for the quarterfinals. This is where I probably have my boldest prediction in the bracket. My gut feeling is that the Atlanta Reign are going to select the Florida Mayhem with their pick. Considering they're either the best or second best team from those who I have advancing in the knockout round, this may be a little surprising to some of you. But I see it like this. In the May Melee, Florida picked them because they wanted to make a statement, right? They picked the Reign because they wanted to show the world they're not scared of them anymore. And that's exactly what they proved. They beat Atlanta convincingly and even jokingly called them losers to try and poke fun at Dogman. I believe that Atlanta look at that personally, and I think they want revenge. After getting beat up by a division rival who willingly picked them over other opponents, the Reign are going to come into this tournament with a chip on their shoulders. They want to make a statement. They want to show the world that they aren't overhyped. Unfortunately for Atlanta though, I kind of see this backfiring since Florida are definitely a better team, but maybe they'll give us a good show at least. Everything else about this round is fairly standard, I feel, though. The Shock in all likelihood will pick the Gladiators or the Valiant. I lean more towards the Gladiators just because they are probably the worst team here, but I can totally see them going with the Valiant as well just because they love to bully them. The Valiant are practically their little brothers that they love to exploit the weaknesses of. In the end, though, I think they pick the Gladiators and just cruise to the semis. Meanwhile, Philly decides to pick the Valiant over Paris. I know it may be tempting to pick the Eternal just because they know them a lot better, but the Valiant are a worse team for sure, and they're a lot more one-dimensional than Paris is. And the problem with the Valiant's favorite comp is that Philly also happens to slap on it. Carpe Tracer and Hisu Ash is a deadly combo that could easily keep Shaxx and KSP in check. And if the Valiant DPS can't roll, they're pretty much screwed because Philly have them beat out everywhere else. I see Philly exposing the Valiant without too much of an issue as they progress onward to the semis. And of course, we also have poor Vancouver who are stuck with Paris. The Titans may be getting better, but this is obviously not an opponent they can deal with. And I mean, that's just really obvious to me. That roster is a million times stronger than theirs. And if they can't even take a map off Atlanta, you can't really expect them to do any better against Paris. From there, we have the semis, and if I'm going to be honest, I don't give Paris much of a shot of taking down San Francisco. The Eternal may be a solid team, but the Shock really do do look unstoppable right now. They even stomped Philly like they were some open division team the other day. San Francisco are so deadly, and I don't think the Paris Genji comps will do them any good. That team's confidence is at another level, so I'm kind of expecting it to be a blowout. Philly versus Florida is a bit more interesting though. Last time they played, it did not go well for the Fusion. They clearly weren't prepared for the mayhem at the moment in time, and they didn't even have a great grasp on the meta, not to mention that Hisu was not available to be fielded at the time, which only put them at a bigger disadvantage. This time around though, I see it playing out differently. Through their motivation for vengeance and having a better grasp on the meta, they take down the Mayhem in a closely contested series, allowing for them to make the finals. But that's where it ends, I fear. After the smackdown the Shock gave them last week, it seems likely that a similar scenario plays out in this finals match. The Fusion might put up a slightly better fight this time, but I doubt it'll go more than 6 maps. The Shock are simply at a different level compared to the rest of this region. Nobody can keep up with them, and that'll be on full display as they dismantle the Fusion map by map. In a prediction that surprises absolutely nobody, I see the Shock taking home first place with relative ease. But yeah, that pretty much sums up my brief thought process behind my North American bracket. With that said, let's move on to the Asian region. Over there we kick it off with probably the least exciting game of that tournament when the Guangzhou Charge take on the Chengdu Hunters for the second week in a row. With the meta not changing, you'd have to think that this is Charge favored. They've developed their own style that really works for them. Instead of running the Tracer or Ashe, they've been putting Eileen on the Torb and it's found great success. Generally speaking, Double Shield is more in their comfort zone than it is for Chengdu. The Charge could be reliant on their DPS as well as Krong and Shu, who are pretty dangerous on the Sigma and Zen. The Charge have really been hitting their stride as of late, and they're even on a nice little 4-game winning streak. On the other side of things, Chengdu continue to not be able to find their footing. If I did my math right, then they're currently on like a 12-game losing streak or something like that. Let's face the facts. They stink. This team is over-reliant on their DPS and Wrecking Ball comps to keep them in games, and it's pretty obvious that is not working, and it's not nearly enough for that matter. They can't seem to find a system that works for them in a double shield meta either, and unless they come into this matchup with major changes, I fear they will continue to get rolled. While they are very much overdue for one of their classic upsets, I don't see it happening in this meta or against the Charge for that matter. The Charge take it 3-1 and advance to the semifinals. I will say though, I won't be super surprised if the Hunters put up a decent fight. Between the losing streak and the Charge being overdue for a loss, there could realistically be a world where they make this a close game. In fact, I'm kind of ready for the Charge to maybe show some signs of weakness here and there. They'll likely remain firmly in control, but it could be noticeable at times. Moving on to quarterfinal matchup number 2, the London Spitfire will play the Seoul Dynasty. Believe it or not, but these two have not played each other at all this year. This is going to be the first time. So in a way, we're kind of going into this blind. I don't really have any expectations. Given London's rise recently as well as how weird Seoul is, I believe it's safe to say this game has no favored team. At this very moment in time, I'm still pretty 50-50 on who I think wins. Like, it really does depend. If both teams played the way they did last week, then it's difficult to tell who wins this. London I kind of trust in to continue their good performances, so in my opinion this game ultimately comes down to what version of the Dynasty we get. If we get a competitive version of them, they will either win this game or take it the distance. If we get the trash version of them, then they'll probably get swept. I can never tell with them, it's so weird. It's like they pick and choose when to wake up. After how they performed last week though, part of me thinks we are going to get the competitive version of them this time. Finally putting Michelle back in at the off-tank position might be what they needed. Since they have a natural off-tank player in the game, they're going to have far better versatility if they decide to shy away from the Orisa Sigma. But I can't say for certain if that'll be enough for them to win. The London Spitfire are not somebody you can be taking lightly. In my opinion, they're probably at the top of their game right now. They're finally starting to find consistent success with whoever they play next to Glister, whether that would be Aldo or Babel, who has been showing great promise on the Widowmaker. Not to mention that Hylie has been looking fantastic on the Baptiste. In this kind of meta, I get pretty similar vibes from both sides. They play a very similar style, and I notice that they like to play a slower tempo, where they play patiently, and they rely heavily on their Tracer Widow comps to make the big plays to open everything up. If both teams were to rely on this style like I think they will again, I think I lean slightly more towards London. It's not an easy decision for me to make, but I'm going 3-2 London. On paper, Seoul appear to have the better DPS, but I have a good feeling about London this week. Do not underestimate those boys. I'm ready for a big day out of Glister and Babel. Try to think about the supports in this situation as well. London may have an advantage there that you may be sleeping on. To talk about the more obvious subject at hand first, Bogosian is not impressed on the brig, like not at all. Sanguinar has shown a lot more promise on that hero for sure, and I also tend to lean more towards Haile on BAP over Toby. Haile's been outputting some great performances on him, so all in all, I would gladly take the London supports over Souls in any sort of Baptiste Brigitte meta. You could argue the tanks and the DPS are a different story and that they're a bit more even, but I'd say the advantage at support will be enough for them to squeeze out the win. Seoul have been playing better, so I'm ready for them to put up a good fight. However, they have proven time and time again to be untrustworthy. On any given week, they can either compete with Shanghai or get swept by Chengdu. They are impossible to predict at this point, and I do not trust them. While the Dynasty very well could win this game, London feel like a safer choice to me. Anyway, to close out day 1 of the APAC tournament, we've got the fated rematch between the Hangzhou Spark and NYXL. It's funny how things work. The only game the Spark found success in during these qualifiers was against New York. They didn't win any of their other games, and to be honest, they've progressively gotten worse. And it goes without saying that they currently do not have a great understanding of the meta. London made complete fools out of them the other day. They seem to be too attached to the Echo comps, and it's been coming back to bite them more often than not. Architect hasn't looked horrible on Echo, but the team as a whole can't really seem to get it together. I prefer them with Architect on like Tracer, Mei, Genji, or even Hanzo. Echo seems to have less of a place in the meta than she used to, and I'm hoping the Spark have realized that. If they try and match the NYXL on Genji comps or something, they may have a chance, I feel. The Spark have already shown me that their tanks can keep up, so now the DPS just have to show up because they'll definitely have some space to work with. But again, it really does depend on what the Spark choose to do. If they play Echo or prove to have inferior Genji comps, then that may spell trouble. The Spark coaches seem pretty stubborn to me, so my guess is they either mess up with what they need to play, or they don't do a good enough job with preparation. And that's a big reason why I have the NYXL taking the series 3-1. It's not the only reason though. Now that the NYXL can run Hoxel and Brigitte, they could have an enormous advantage with their support line. I already prefer Jonik over Bebe as it is, but now Mika and or IDK potentially have to try and keep up with one of the best Brig players we have ever seen. That versatility of being able to have Hoxel effectively play 2 different positions will give them great flexibility, and I don't know if the Spark will be able to counter said flexibility. I am not a fan of how Hangzhou looked last week, and I don't have much of a reason to believe this week is going to be any different. Alrighty, with my round 1 winner selected, we can now move on to the semifinals. In match number 1, we have the 1-seeded Shanghai Dragons versus the London Spitfire. I'll be straight up honest with you guys. I don't know if any team in the APAC region even stands a chance of beating the Dragons. Like with San Francisco, they've simply been on another level during these qualifiers. Shanghai certainly do make mistakes, that much is for sure, but they always find a way to come out on top. They are ridiculously clutch, and I don't know if London has what it takes to be that clutch in a close game against a seriously good team. Another thing I'd like to add on is I don't think there's anybody on that London team who can handle Fleta. If Babel can ride his hot streak, then he has a chance against Lip, but I don't see a world where the Spitfire totally neutralize Fleta. If they were able to do that, they'd have a chance to win, but at the end of the day, that's a big what if. Shutting down the Shanghai DPS is a lot easier said than done. And even if they do manage to pull it off, what are they going to do against Void? It feels like a lose-lose situation to me. No matter what London try, Shanghai will likely have a counter for it. London would have to play the game of their lives. I mean, I'm talking near flawless game planning and execution. Either that or Shanghai like totally throws or something. Both scenarios feel pretty unlikely to me though, and that's why I am predicting the Dragons to win the series in 4 maps. A moment like this might be a bit too big for the Spitfire to handle. London are like Shanghai's little brother at the end of the day. They are very talented, yes, but it feels like they still have some learning to do before they're ready to dethrone their big brothers. Moving on to semifinal matchup number 2, the NYXL get a chance to continue the redemption tour against the Guangzhou Charge. These two played each other recently, and it was a pretty interesting series. The NYXL felt like they had the upper hand for a while, but then they kind of choked it away in typical New York fashion. That game definitely did feel winnable for them though. They managed to keep it close for a while, which indicates to me that them and the Charge are probably pretty even. And now that the NYXL can go back and study the film, I get the feeling that this time's going to be even closer. I'm in a weird situation with this prediction. So the Charge are certainly in a better place heading into this tournament because they've won some good games and they're on a nice winning streak. However, my gut feeling is that they're not going to play amazing in this tournament for some reason. If my prediction of them showing signs of weakness in the Chengdu game comes true, then I believe that this will be a power struggle and that New York is going to find an opportunity to strike. If the Charge stick to their Torp comps, I think New York will be a bit more ready for it this time. That in itself is a big part of what decides this outcome in my opinion. If Guangzhou want to stick with their Torb comps, then I think I favor the NYXL. But if the Charge surprise us or the NYXL maybe play too much Sabiobi or something, then I like the Charge. The Charge have proven to me that their players are confident enough to go head to head with the NYXL superstars, so I'm not super worried about them being outclassed, except for one position. I do have some concerns about main support. Early on in that series, the NYXL did look a lot better than Guangzhou when they played Haksel at Brigitte, and if Haksel plays her again like I'm expecting him to, then that might spell trouble for the Charge, as I don't believe they have an answer for that, and that's why I am going to pick the NYXL. Through newfound confidence and better preparation, the NYXL win the series 3-2 and advance to the grand finals. It's a little risky to rely on New York in a playoff scenario, but I have a good feeling about them. They'll be more prepared, and they'll match up just fine composition-wise. With the semifinals now over with, we can move on to New York versus Shanghai in the grand finals. After getting revenge 2 games in a row, the NYXL's confidence should be sky high, and with a chance to pull off a vengeance trifecta, their motivation will be through the roof to do whatever it takes to take down their final obstacle. But this will be one heck of a ferocious beast they have to slay, and to be 100% honest, I don't know if they have what it takes. Like, what can you do to throw them off? I doubt Genji comps would be an issue for them, and I don't really think that the NYXL could completely outplay them on like Tracer Ashe or even Echo for that matter. Main tank and flex support are probably the only 2 positions in general that I have total confidence in with New York in this matchup. Mono and Jonak, I think they'll do just fine, and at the very least they should be able to cancel out their opposites. But generally speaking, the Dragons are like far better at most individual positions, and their overall coordination is definitely a step or 2 ahead. The vengeance will end here for the NYXL, as I believe the Dragons win the series 4-2. The Dragons are too good, man. I don't know what else to say. They're unstoppable whenever they want to be. They're absolute machines, and they don't know how to stop. Even if they don't play well, they still find a way to win anyway, like every single time. It's like the pressure gets to them temporarily, and then they forget about it or something like that. Or maybe it just takes them some time to warm up. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The Dragons would really have to beat themselves to let this slip away. But you know, I'm kind of expecting the NYXL to put up a decent fight anyway. Through their confidence they built up in the previous rounds, they find a way to overachieve. Or maybe they just take advantage of Shanghai having a slow start. Either way, they come up short in the end still, and the Shanghai Dragons empire continues its reign of terror. But yeah, that pretty much concludes my thoughts on the APAC tournament. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. If you did, then I would appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Feel free to tell me who wins in your brackets down in the comment section as well. And don't forget that you can also support me even further by following me on Twitter at ATP Overwatch, joining the community Discord through the link in the description, and becoming a channel member by hitting that join button. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.